Hey everybody, what up? All right, so I would like to be the NVIDIA CEO. I'd love to have some of that money. I think he's probably one of the better CEOs out there. I don't know anything about him, to be honest, but I do read these articles that come out, and it's like coding is dead. We're not going to need programmers anymore because we have AI, and somehow AI is going to do everything that programmers do. And the reason why I'm making this video, and sadly, not very many people are going to watch it, and that's fine. I have an opinion. He has an opinion. I've been in the trenches doing this stuff for a long time now, but my opinion is that this is a bunch of hype. And it's because if you are the CEO of NVIDIA and there's a gold rush going on, and your job is to supply pickaxes to mine for that gold, you're going to want that gold rush to continue. And even if it's not there, you're going to pretend like it is. You see, the media has been hyping things since really the dawn of the internet. Does anybody remember Y2K? I mean, we thought the world was going to end. Like the media, everybody, that didn't know anything about it was freaking out. And it's a common thing. So Y2K, computers weren't prepared for the turn of the century. And everybody thought that it was going to basically crash the entire world's economy at the time. People were talking about like missiles would be going off, like we might lose power. There was all kinds of talk, and none of it was true. But this sort of hype and panic and basically trying to predict the future of what technology and specifically programming and software engineering is all about predates this by quite a bit. I'll go back to the 1950s with COBOL. So this actually stands for Common Business Oriented Language. And when it came out, everybody was saying, well, you don't need programmers anymore because with this Common Business Oriented Language, you're just going to have to learn that. So essentially non-programmers can write business logic, and therefore it will make programmers obsolete. You don't need the ones and zeros anymore. COBOL will do it all for you. So instead of COBOL taking away all the programmers' jobs, what it did is it actually created millions of COBOL programmers. All the way up until the point of where I started my career, I was working for a major insurance company that had mainframe servers still on site. And those mainframe servers were running COBOL. And there was a big discussion at the time because everybody was talking about .NET, and they were trying to transition a lot of COBOL programmers over to .NET. And what ended up happening is that happened all over the industry because we didn't need COBOL programmers anymore. But it turns out there was still a lot of legacy software that was running it. So we had something called COBOL cowboys, which is people that still understood how to write the code, all of a sudden became hugely in demand because they were the only ones who knew how to write the code and run the systems. And there were still major government systems and airlines and insurance and financial sectors and everything that were still running these things. And when I lived in Great Falls, Virginia, one of the wealthiest areas in the entire country, one of my neighbors who had a much bigger house, I think it was like $4.5 million or something like that. But his house, he was a COBOL developer, and like he made all the money. Wife stayed at home, but he was considered one of these COBOL cowboys that really knew a lot of in-demand things. We're not in demand. I'm sorry, it wasn't in demand anymore, but there was a shortage because the world still needed somebody like him who knew what he was doing to run these systems and try to get them off and eventually to .NET. So the same argument was also created for SQL. When SQL came out, everybody thought, and this was back in the 1970s, everybody thought, well, you don't need database programmers anymore. You're just going to have people that, non-programmers be able to write SQL. And yeah, lo and behold, that actually created a ton of jobs, right? Still one of the most in-demand languages you can learn. Here's an article about 7 reasons why they think AI is not going to take SQL jobs. Not going to get into that. But the fact of the matter is it's still a very in-demand skill, probably one of the most valuable skills you can have to date. So is the NVIDIA, the CEO, is he any different from any other CEO? I mean, one that comes to mind is Elon Musk, right? How long have we been promised self-driving vehicles? It got to the point where like a couple of years ago, Waymo was like, here's all of our code. We can't figure this shit out. Hopefully somebody else out there can. And I own a Tesla. I have used the autopilot. I would never pay for it. I don't trust it. And it's done things like not understand where the hot lanes are, taking me off the highway to try to redirect my routes. I just don't need that in my life. And I guess the fact of the matter is I know that it's just a bunch of sensors and things that can easily, sometimes I'm in my garage and it looks like there's a truck or motorcycle next to me. So we're not close. We haven't been close. That's without, the weather. So you add some rain and some snow into that mix. Like we're miles. We're probably never going to get there at this rate. It seems like. I mean, I'm sure I should never say never, but the bottom line is Elon Musk has been way wrong about this going back all the way to 2016. Now, what about crypto, right? I wish I would have bought Bitcoin back when I first heard about it. I didn't think that there was much feasibility in it. One time I was in a bar and I was sitting next to this guy who was like a mechanical engineer. He worked on ductwork or whatever. And this guy was trying to tell me a bunch of bullshit about all these different crypto things. And I just, listening to him talk, it was one of the biggest things in my life that was like, okay, well, I'm never going to get involved in this hype, because a big red flag is when you got a bunch of people that have no idea what they're talking about trying to tell you how things are, especially in a technological world or a programming world. It's like everybody thinks they're an economist. Everybody thinks they're like a technologist. Everybody now thinks that they're a cryptographer. Like, you see, the vibes that I got from hearing that person in the bar talking about something that he didn't know was the dot-com bubble. Really, I was a teenager just graduating high school when all of this stuff collapsed, just entering the job market. Wasn't really too involved in it, but obviously I saw the world before the internet, and then the internet, and then the dot-com bubble. And the reason why I say that it reminds me of that is like somebody like Warren Buffett ended up making a ton of money, becoming one of the richest investors, of the richest people in the entire world, and still is. But one of the reasons why he did so well was because he actually avoided all the dot-com stuff. So there was a time when all you had to do was have a .com to your name and you were worth like billions of dollars. And all of that basically evaporated overnight, really with the collapse of a website called pets.com, which is now owned by PetSmart. So if you go to pets.com, it'll redirect you to PetSmart. So if you read up on pets.com, basically that, it says here, a company raised $82.5 million in February of 2000 in an IPO, and it filed for bankruptcy just 9 months later. They didn't have a business model. They just had a website. It was a domain, pets.com, good domain. So they're worth $82.5 million. Their business model didn't even know how to ship dog food bags. Now, this is before even like Amazon was a big thing, because Amazon at the time wasn't even profitable, even though it'd been around since the mid 90s, didn't draw its first dollar of profit until 2004. Also the same time that Google was having its IPO. Which brings me back to my point of Warren Buffett avoiding all of those .coms, and he actually invested in companies like Heinz and Geico and like all these companies that actually had tangible products. And it turned out that he just ended up making a massive amounts of money, as everybody else that was all in on the .com stuff started losing everything. He was gaining everything. He was gaining the ability to buy even more companies. So he once said about crypto, and specifically Bitcoin, that it's probably rat poison squared. And here's that quote here. So that was a famous quote when he said it, because Warren Buffett, just like he avoided the .coms in the 90s, he's also avoiding crypto up until this date, and including his longtime, lifelong buddy, Charlie Munger, who passed away last year. He also hated Bitcoin. And basically the argument was like, hey, there is no tangible benefit to this. The only benefit is that you're going to be able to sell it for more money than you bought it for. So somebody like Mark Anderson, who is very famous amongst the Silicon Valley investors, he's a angel investor, one of the most famous out there. Andreessen Horowitz is one of the biggest firms out there as far as investing in a lot of successful companies. But he went on to say that Warren Buffett is basically an old white guy who's just basically crapping on new technology. Now, that's paraphrased, but you can read the article if you want. So that's what he said about Warren Buffett's view on crypto. So basically attacking him as an old man and not knowing what he's talking about. And I get it. That's a common thing, right, where the old rejects the new. But all that said, Here's a picture of Mark Aderson, wearing this Google Glass, right? Everybody remember Google Glass and the hype that caused. Here's Sergey Brin from Google. It looks ridiculous. And it obviously wasn't feasible, but they were all in on that. See what Google Glass was trying to do, and they actually were headed in the right direction with trying to get a very small device, because that is the biggest problem with both AR and VR, is that the devices are too large, they're too clunky, they're too closed off from the outside world. And Google Glass was going to, they were going to fix that problem. But the problem is that it was sort of a worthless piece of crap, and it cost a ton of money, and it didn't really do anything. See, virtual reality has been around for a long time. There was something called Nintendo Virtual Boy that came out in the mid-90s, 1995. And I'll be honest, probably most people have never even heard of this or even seen it. I don't think I've ever seen this in the wild. But it was Nintendo's stab at getting into VR. But it was just simply too early for its time, just like Google Glass. And it's not like I can get on Aderson for trying to get behind Google Glass. I mean, it was like I wanted VR and AR to take off, but it just simply takes time. But we always hype things up to the extreme. That's just what we do in the media. When Pokemon Go came out, it was actually an example of, oh, look, this is augmented reality and everybody loves it and they're playing it on their phone. And yes, it was a humongous success, but it was one single video game. And unfortunately, that didn't transfer to the rest of the world. We still don't really have augmented reality. Although, if you ask me, that is something that's going to be in our near future. So yeah, Google Glass didn't pan out. It didn't get rid of opportunity, really. It created opportunity. It created the fact that, people like Palmer Luckey knew that there was a reason to try to develop a virtual reality machine. And when we look at what he was able to do, I mean, he created the Oculus and he did it from the garage of his parents' home. This is the first prototype of this thing. Obviously way different than what it looks like now. Sells this company to Facebook, Meta, for $2 billion. And, the rest is history. So now we have the Oculus Quest 3. We have the Valve Index. We have some great headsets that are out there, but they're still not widely adopted because of the same problems that we've been dealing with all this time. They're heavy, they're clunky, they cause motion sickness. We have screen door effects and things. The graphics and video game engines and such, they suffer when it comes to just like flickering, and those are tough problems to solve, and they're going to be that way for a long time. So even though we're not there with the technology, we still have efforts being made. So Apple Vision Pro is a good contender now. It's good that Apple is getting into the VR market. It's going to take a lot of really expert minds, a lot of money to actually figure out these problems. And then eventually when we do figure out these problems to a commercial success standpoint, it's going to create more jobs and more opportunity, which is really the point of this video, is that all of this hype and all this talk that we've done for decades for the entire invention of really modern day programming and software, these new technologies, we've hyped them up, and many times they pay off. Most of the time they don't. But even when they do pay off, they create more jobs. And a lot of times it could also be premature. So like when we look at AR, right, the AR VR thing, it reminds me of Zuckerberg and Facebook they're changing their name to Meta. And why do they do that? It's because they wanted to create a metaverse. They thought for some reason, because of COVID, which is pretty short-sighted, that everybody that works who doesn't even want to get on a friggin' Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting and show their face is somehow going to want to put on a clunky headset and have that thing riding on their head all day so that they can be in some sort of virtual world when they're supposed to be working. So I could see this being an absolute nightmare in the workforce, actually. It would be fun to do this. It's almost like Slack emojis or something, but to the utmost degree or whatever, where it's like everybody's just going to be like basically playing a video game. And this is why it's not feasible. It's not feasible because the hardware isn't there. The software isn't there, and it's just sort of stupid. It's a video game. But Zuckerberg and Facebook have now lost approximately $50 billion as of 2020 on that investment. And I actually don't criticize Zuckerberg and Facebook or Meta for this. I think that Facebook is a crap product. I don't use it. I just store photos on it. They have a dying business model. If it wasn't for Instagram and some of these other investments, and now AI, they're doing good things in AI. And yeah, they fired and missed big time on the metaverse thing. But I like where their head is at. They're trying to do something different. It just was kind of a stupid idea, really. And that goes into when the cryptocurrency phase was dying down a few years ago, it's like we needed to hype something else up. NVIDIA needed something, right? NVIDIA was selling to all these graphics cards to Bitcoin miners. And when all that crashed and it all of a sudden became unprofitable to mine Bitcoins, then we needed something else. And those something else's were basically starting up exchanges like, remember FTX? FTX going under, like that was a pretty big deal a couple of years ago, losing hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, this person was one of the wealthiest in the world and now went to zero and is in prison. But this is really the fact that there's still not a whole lot of feasibility with crypto. There's not a whole lot you can do with it except for illegal transactions and such. And granted, I know that they're trying to work on that, but that's been the argument for many years. Anyway, that craze died down. So what did we do? We jumped over to NFTs. So does anybody remember the NFTs and this Bored Ape? And this thing's selling for, Yuga Labs valued at $4 billion. I don't know if that's accurate or not. $1 billion is. Anyway, so there was this picture actually sold for a crap load of money here. And it actually, just a couple years later, because everybody realized how worthless it is, it was down 88%. And this is back in mid 2023. And then if I look at it now, looks like some of these things are selling for still quite a bit of money, but not nearly as high as what they were. And, for what? Like, this was all just hype and people trying to put their money behind this so that they could make a bunch of money selling a digital image that you could download and use whenever you wanted. So yeah, the point of this video is that we've hyped things up, and many times when the hype paid off, it actually created much more opportunity and growth in the industry. And the hype is sometimes it's hype. And like this, you guys remember the engineer at Google? He's an engineer at Google, and he was convinced that ChatGPT was like a sentient being. Yeah. Leather. Here's me asking how many R's are in the word strawberry with DeepSeek R1 14B, which is the latest hype. And according to this, there's 2 R's in the word strawberry. So yeah, with the advent of the smartphone, it created a ton of jobs. With the advent of VR, we're creating more programming jobs in VR. With the advent of being able to put AI and tools like Photoshop, which is coming up pretty soon, with this Firefly product. This should be interesting, but I've also seen a lot of AI art to date that is pretty terrible. I have a video that shows you the latest from OpenAI and Sora and how it just doesn't actually work, and it's not going to work anytime soon. There's other tools that are out there that are all trying to integrate AI, and some of it is like they're like shoehorning it in where it's just simply not ready. Just like Meta was not ready for the metaverse, and the world's still not ready for the Apple Vision Pro. It's too expensive. There's not enough usage for it. So yeah, I think that when I started my career, the COBOL developers that were thinking that the sky was falling because COBOL was going away and mainframes were going away. And what did that introduce? It introduced a whole lot of cloud computing. And how many jobs have been created in DevOps and cloud computing? There's a ton. And not just managing those stacks like at AWS, also for all the companies that use it, integrate with it. And that doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. So do I think the NVIDIA CEO is accurate or not? And I don't really know. Maybe you could argue that like ones and zeros of coding are not necessary anymore. It's not necessary to learn how to do a for loop, but I don't actually agree with that. We see that this thing can't even tell me how many R's are in the word strawberry, but somehow we're going to feel comfortable with this thing flying airplanes and self-driving cars and being responsible for the medical equipment that is diagnosing you or doing surgeries or building your cars. And so I think even the NVIDIA CEO would acknowledge that there's always going to need to be human intervention. And I think the biggest point of this entire video is that, yes, I've seen a lot of these hype cycles and I've seen a lot of the sky is falling. And I think we're going to continue to see that. Generative AI is a humongous breakthrough, might even be the biggest thing since the smartphone or the internet. It's going to change the world. It already is. But are we going to do the same old boring things, right? We're currently looking at this video on an old platform, which is YouTube, that was created in 2006, watching a 2D screen and clicking on different websites and clicking buttons and things using the same HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Why would humanity continue to have this as a medium if we truly have AI? If we truly have AI, I would imagine we have a whole lot of new stuff on the horizon that is going to be possible because of these tools. And when we create new possibilities like the advent of the automobile, it's going to create entirely new industries, from insurance to assembly lines to tire manufacturing, all of that, right? It's going to be the same thing with AI. We're not going to build the same boring e-commerce websites, because once you get to a point where anybody can just say, hey, build me a website that looks like Amazon, what is that going to do when you can't differentiate one site from another, right? If everybody's got a YouTube competitor sitting on a cloud hosting provider and we're all fighting to see who's going to be the next viral YouTube platform, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't seem like that's where we're going to end up. I mean, when I think of a world like that, I think of like, you're going to have 1 million people entering you're going to have 1 million people entering this workforce. And if everybody can do the same thing and nothing differentiates us, like, come on, that's just not going to be the case. We're going to need creative people that are going to take these tools and technologies and be able to put them together just like modern day programmers do now. And if you get to a point where a non-programmer can write a bunch of logic and plug things together like puzzle pieces, which is basically like what our jobs are, and it can somehow do that just as effectively as a programmer, I just don't buy it. Because people that are logically thinking, creative individuals, they're going to simply have an edge over people that are not. And you're still going to have an entire world of creation. And my guess is that we're going to be building new things that nobody sees coming at this point. But who knows? Maybe somehow all the programming jobs are gone and we're all just like looking at the same website for some reason using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that's just going to be the world that we live in. I don't buy it. I feel like everybody's been wrong. I feel like this is just another thing that is just to make money and to continue to increase shareholder value. So, yeah, I've talked a lot. I could actually probably talk about this for hours and hours on end. I think the tools are great. They're a tool. Let's hope that they get better. So that's it. That's my thoughts. Everybody have a great night, and I will talk to you later.